What's up, everybody? It's the Roundtable Sports Podcast. My name is Taylor McLean, and I just watched the Jacksonville Jaguars take on the Indianapolis Colts. It happens twice a year, and it's not always exciting. The Colts have had some weird years in the last couple years, but this game definitely had my attention and was one of the games I wanted to watch pretty soon. I haven't gotten to watch that many games just as like for Tuesday as I would like. Normally I would probably have a couple more under the belt, but this is one of the first ones that I wanted to watch. I have a lot of respect for Trevor as a up and coming franchise style quarterback, and then this is the first game that we're getting to see Anthony in all his glory. So I wanted to watch both those things, as well as the team around both these quarterbacks, to see what they both had going on. So it was an easy thing for me to get on the coaching film and watch both these teams play here tonight. So like I said, a little later than I wanted to get to it. Hopefully, you're still interested in my thoughts about both these teams. And of course, we'll start with the winning team, as I always do, with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And, this game was, I think, a lot closer than Jaguars fans would have hoped. I think they have pretty high expectations overall for this team after last year. I did feel like last year they were a little bit ahead of schedule. So to have like really true Super Bowl aspirations for this team does feel a little bit like a stretch, but you are trying to have a playoff berth. You're trying to really show progress in this year, most of which is coming from Trevor Lawrence, but you also need to have progression from the defense in this year. And so it's a kind of an overall thing for Jacksonville, whereas for Indianapolis, we're just starting the process. This is Anthony's first year versus Trevor's third year. We got brand new coaches. This is their first year versus Doug Peterson's second year, and then this is Steichen's first gig period as far as being a head coach in the NFL. Maybe, I don't know if he was I don't think he was a head coach. So lots of intrigue for me with this. And for the Jaguars, being down so late in the fourth quarter, albeit from a kind of fluky looking defensive touchdown, still being down that much in this game is probably a little disconcerting. But like I'm going to say for all of these games, this is just week one. And now more than ever, it's an extension of the preseason because, you don't play near as much as teams used to in the preseason, for better or for worse. I'd much rather see a little sloppy football that means something versus, a whole bunch of injuries like the year that Michael Vick got hurt in the preseason. That would have been a bummer year to watch the Atlanta Falcons film. And as we've already found out to this point, it's going to be a real bummer to watch the New York Jets film now, because I think I know what I need to know about Zach Wilson to this point, and what I saw in that Monday night game. And that's why we watched the games, and that's why I wanted to watch Anthony and Trevor today. But that's going to be a real bummer for me. I try to watch like 10 games of each team each year. That's what I did last year. I watched a bunch of teams all the way through, but even the worst teams, I saw 10 games. And to think about watching those Jets again like that, like it was last year, is pretty painful. But I digress on a Jacksonville podcast. But still, the point being, I know what I need to know about Zach. I feel like I'm getting to know what I need to know about Trevor. He just needs to continue to do what he's capable of doing more consistently. Now, do I have some criticisms of Trevor? Sure. I wish he would unleash the beast running more. Absolutely. I wish he would run more. Now that's a criticism only because he has great wheels. Like, I think he's not, Lamar or anything. Let's not get out of control. And he's not incredibly shifty, but he, for a guy that's as tall and lanky as he is, that can see the whole field and everything, he runs incredibly well. not a Steve Young level, not even, but he's faster than Carson Wentz. He's well more smooth than that. He's smoother than you would think for a guy that moves as is, like I said, as tall as he is, and is statuesque. But he's not a statue back there. And most of the time when he runs, he's trying to create more time and throw the ball down the field, which is absolutely what he should be doing. But still, I'd like to see him, take the open field a little bit more, which he did today. And that's part of what gets me up about that, is that 11-yard run that you see him run. He actually is somewhat dynamic in that department. So you're not looking to get him hit, but I think it would add something that they're lacking a little bit with their offense. That's my one key criticism of Trevor. But the thing is, the reason that he doesn't do that as much, I think, is, like I said, he is dynamic with the ball in his hands, throwing it down the field. The thing is, today they didn't have as much time to do that. They didn't have as much time to work things down the field because they had a lot of problems with the interior of the Indianapolis Colts defense, both from the defensive tackle, defensive line standpoint, as well as the linebacker level. And of course, the Colts got back Shaq Leonard, as well as, I nearly called him Darius, Shaq Leonard, as well as having 44 back there. I nearly called him Orlando, but it's Zaire Franklin. Having him, who I think is probably the alpha now to Shaq Leonard's beta, I guess. But Shaq Leonard's still pretty good. He's just still kind of working his way back from his injury. But having both those guys back there, and then DeForest Buckner on top of Grover Stewart, who had a great game, that makes them really formidable up the middle. And just like a wrestler can dictate the terms of a UFC fight because he can tell you where the fight's going to take place, the Colts can take away a good amount of the running lanes and your ability to run between the tackles with their front. And I thought that that's not a good thing for Jacksonville, when that's kind of where you're weak overall. And really, without Cam Robinson and losing Cam Taylor, which I never thought I thought would be a big deal. On top of, you lost Scherf to an ankle, who is day to day, so not week to week. Maybe he misses this week, maybe he doesn't, but just all of those things on top of each other really led to the Colts being able to dictate a lot of the terms to the Jacksonville Jaguars. If Travis Etienne doesn't rip off that big run, then the Colts running game doesn't hit over 100 yards on well over 30 attempts. So that's you throw out that one run, and of course you throw out the best run of the day, and anybody's running sample is going to look a little bit more paltry, right? But it would have been a pretty tough day had you thrown out the 28 yards on that play. Then we're talking about a much lower average per run. And it was pretty apparent when you watch the film that they were having a lot of trouble with that. And with DeForest Buckner, and then having trouble up the middle means that there's linebackers running amok, especially when it's linebackers, the caliber that the Colts actually have. So that was a big problem for Jacksonville when they were on offense, is they had to move the ball through these chunk plays, and then they don't have the offensive linemen really to sustain that. They have the linemen that they do have are probably better run blockers than they are pass blockers, but they were still no match for that interior presence that they have. And then it was interesting because they were also getting some action from Kwity Paye and some of the outside rush as well. And that was more indicative of the offensive lineman, I thought, than the actual rush itself. The rush itself is more of an interior rush. It's all kind of stemming off of Grover and DeForest Buckner, which is fine, but it's better. There's going to be times where teams can handle that. They have this really solid interior, and then that's going to lead for tougher times to the Colts. And just like with your quarterback, you want your defense to be able to handle whatever the offense is going to be able to throw at them. That's I mean, that's pretty straightforward. But at the same time, like, like I just said, if you're weak at the edges, if you're the Colts, then you've got, and then that other offensive line is strong up the middle, then that's going to cause a problem for you. And you're not going to be able to dictate the terms like I was talking about. You're not a wrestler that can keep it standing or take it to the ground. The Colts might not be able to dictate those terms all the time, but for the Jacksonville Jaguars, because the the guard, center guard, whatever, is kind of their weak point. Really, the offensive line overall, without Cam Robinson to kind of bookend everything is kind of their weakness, because they also, lost their right tackle to an exorbitant price from the Chiefs, which I just wasn't really that sold on necessarily. He looked fine as the Chiefs, but I don't think the Jacksonville could afford to pay him what the Chiefs paid him. But at the same time, that does leave you kind of replacing a lot of positions. And then Scherf goes down, and then you're really in trouble. Not that he was dominant by any means, but at least he brings like a continuity and somebody that you can kind of lean on a little bit more. And that'll also be Cam Robinson, even though he's no, top 5 left tackle either. But, he is a huge mauling run blocker. And then if you don't have to lean, like, if you can kind of slide away from him and give the other side help and then leave Cam out there by himself a little bit more, that helps the offensive line pass block better. And I think that'll lead to bigger things for Jacksonville. Because like I said, I don't think it's going to be a dominant run blocking unit. I think they're going to be able to run because people are scared of their ability to pass. And they should be more scary down the field than they were last year, because I really like the way that Calvin Ridley looked out there. Like I said, it kind of came and went when the Jaguars were able to really sustain things and move things. It was really more when they had chunk plays from Ridley, from Etienne, etc. But even outside of the big plays, it was good to have Ridley in there for Trevor. It was a blanket, a security blanket that he could lean on and have somebody that is really runs tight routes, really has good speed, but it's his route running. It's the timeliness of his route running. He's on time, and then he's able to create separation with the speed, with the routes, and with the agility he shows in those routes. And Trevor took advantage of that on many occasions. And then it also allowed them to kind of have some big plays that got them by in this game. It was interesting during draft season how much that the draft stock of Calvin Ridley kept going up and up, because they were kept talking like this was going to be the case, like Calvin was going to be back to his old self, like he had a chip on his shoulder from everything that had happened, and that actually looked like it played itself out on the field. And the NFL is a pendulum, right? Everything's it's a terrible pendulum for the video. It's a pendulum, right? It swings back and forth. We'll use my phone, right? So it swung towards Calvin Ridley. He got the targets, he got the attention. Now he'll have the attention of the defense next week, and it'll probably be, swing back to the other peripheral weapons, and it'll go back and forth, and it'll be on the Jacksonville Jaguars to move Calvin around, to have other things in their bag that the other teams haven't seen yet. And as it's week 1, that's a guarantee that that's going to happen. It's not always a sticky thing that year to year offenses, are successful, because a lot of times they don't have that other thing in their bag. When the other teams kind of get like 6 games of film on you and they know what you like to do, they're going to take that thing away from you and make you do something else. So like next week, they'll probably try to take Calvin Ridley away, and the Jacksonville Jaguars will have, either a game plan to move him around, or they won't. And that will affect their success a great deal. So it's just like, I always think about the Dallas Cowboys one year went like 13-3, I think. And Scott Linehan had coordinated the whole thing. They took the play calling away from Jason Garrett, and everything was great, right? But then that second year, he didn't have the adjustments. He didn't have the ability to change it up and do other things. He just had that one thing. And then all of a sudden, everybody had like all the film on that last year, They had plenty of time to study it. And then bam, they came out and they couldn't hardly, the people were calling out the plays that the Cowboys were going to run. And I think that Doug Peterson is much better than that. But that'll be a big test for this year is okay, we've had some time to study. And that's something else to keep in mind with this year or these games. And in week one is a lot of these games were divisional, like this one right here. These teams know each other pretty well, despite, the change in regime with the Indianapolis Colts. They, it's still pretty, that part is sticky. You still know the teams in your division. You still know the personnel of the Colts on defense. That part didn't change a ton. It was, a lot of the same personnel out there, and not all of it, but I mean, you get my point. Still the Grover, DeForest Buckner, Franklin, and now Shaq. That is the core of that defense, and that part has been there, and that still was kind of how they were running things. But I digress. Anyway, so having Calvin Ridley, he looked like his old self, looked like he hit the ground running. With that, it'll be interesting having all the time off. Is it harder to sustain that than someone that, has been doing it year in and year out? Maybe, but maybe at the same time, he hasn't had that wear and tear and he makes it. We'll see. Football's, I always say to myself, it's not a round ball. The ball bounces all types of different directions. And that goes for the injuries too. It's a game of attrition. We lost a bunch of people this week. J.K. Dobbins, Aaron Rodgers, a bunch of people, and those teams are going to have to adapt. It's a next man up type thing, and a lot of times it's like the Eagles, they didn't have any injuries on their offensive line by the time they got to the playoffs, and wasn't all of it, but anyway, and they were able to advance, and that's going to be a big part of it for all of these teams. And like I said, for the Jaguars, wrong point. Here we go. Let's get the hands right. Like I said, for the Jaguars, during threw myself off. Like I said, for the Jaguars, they're missing linemen right now. So we don't know 100% what they're going to look like when they're able to protect for a little longer, which they couldn't do exactly how they wanted to do today. Something else to note with this, which makes me think they have a lot more in their bag, Christian Kirk was definitely the third wide receiver. Like Calvin Ridley actually got out snapped by Zay Jones in this game. And I don't know that I think that Zay Jones is a better receiver than Christian Kirk, like in a vacuum, but he is the bigger of the two and the better run blocker. And that meant that he was out there in the two wide receiver sets. And then when they brought out the third wide receiver, that was obviously Christian Kirk, but he went 3 quarters without catching a ball. He caught a ball in the first quarter and then didn't catch another ball. So it was weird to have him kind of go off and just not think about him really. I was really watching more for their moving Evan Ingram around. They Zay Jones was around, and then Calvin was involved. He was the alpha of the situation for sure. So that was interesting. It wasn't 100% that was the way it was going to work out, but that's one of those things where you're attacking uncertainty. And then finally, by the end of draft season, when most people drafted, he was a 2nd round pick. And that turns out to be looking pretty good after one game. As I said earlier, it'll be about consistency for the Jaguars, because just like with this game, it was very inconsistent. It came out hot and then it got kind of cold and then turned it back on in the end. And they're not going to be able to do that with teams that have, quarterbacks that aren't rookies very often. And they nearly screwed around and lost this game too. I mean, they were down going into that 4th quarter, and then they, Anthony doesn't throw the interception, and maybe they are able to end up coming back in that game. So yeah, it was weird situation, weird game overall, I thought, but I thought I could pretty well explain why it happened too. I felt like it was pretty well kind of patterned out. I don't want to go on the Jaguars without talking about Etienne and Tank Bigsby as well. They definitely, Travis was the alpha for sure, but Tank was also kind of like a reasonable backup, where I thought that he would take over the role should Travis falter or get hurt. So Tank's definitely someone to have on your bench, because he definitely would take over the whole role more than, I don't know, Agnew would probably get some more touches in the passing game for sure, but the goal line would be Tank's, and Tank did factor in on the goal line today, but Etienne is the more explosive of the two, but he is the smaller of the two as well. So gonna have to have both of them to be explosive, but be careful on the Etienne buying in fantasy, because Tank is definitely going to be a part of this as well, but that's every backfield in the NFL. Other note that I didn't like how much I felt like Trayvon Walker just kind of, I just didn't notice him very much on defense. Like I wasn't really, I was focused on other things because it just wasn't really going on for him. So that is troubling, that I do think that Aiden Hutchinson has looked like the alpha between the two so far. That seemed like what I probably would have done. If it was me, they kind of went with upside and with the guy that's a little less refined at that time. But that does worry me a little bit overall for the Jaguars, because that's something that they need to hit on. Because it's third year for Trevor, fourth year next year, fifth year option the year after that. And we're, before that fifth year option hits, talking about an extension. So it's not going to be all that far off before we're paying Trevor. And then and part of that money is probably going to come from Christian Kirk. And when, that money runs out, that actually kind of coincides with Trevor going up a bit with his fifth year option, as it turns out. So, that would seem to be something they kind of foreshadowed today with, they thought they were trying to get their alpha with Kirk, and they can afford that while Trevor's cheap, but they're not going to be able to afford that without it. And I got to think that he'll be more prominently featured in the game plan next week. It's just they didn't have time to work it deep as much because they were overwhelmed up the middle, and it showed in a big way. Anyway, don't know how I turned talk about Walker into Trevor, but everything's about the quarterback for me, and that includes Anthony Richardson. I drafted Anthony on nearly all of my redraft teams. As the second quarterback, I didn't lean on him as the first. I wasn't quite that bold, but I did draft him second in my 2-quarterback salary cap dynasty league, which does have a pretty good premium on quarterbacks when you want a rookie salary quarterback, and not you can't pay Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, even with Lamar having a smaller number this year. It's just not. Anyway, blah blah blah. I have a lot of faith in Anthony, and I wanted to watch him. I was very excited to see what he could do today or on Sunday, against NFL talent, against a team that I think is talented, not extremely talented on defense, but has something. It's not a nothing defense by any means. He'll face better, I think, for sure. But still, I wanted to see how Anthony was going to look, and I wasn't disappointed. When you look at the physical tools out there and you think about his performance in context of it being his first performance and his first start in the NFL, and him not being one of those guys that has just a ton of starts, right? He's definitely not one of those guys that has he's not one of those guys that has 3 years of starts under his belt. He just started the 1 year for Florida. So it's super important to get him out on the field and get him experience. The Colts did just that. They didn't, fool around with Gardner Minshew. And there's a reason they did that. And it plays out on the film. And because Anthony's physical tools are undeniable. He looks huge out there on a Josh Allen level. Like, you see, he is as tall or taller than the lineman. He sees over the line perfectly. He sees the middle of the field perfectly. Not from a reaction and a read standpoint, but just from a vision standpoint. He's seeing over everything. And there's Trevor is tall. I think they're the same height, or Trevor might even be a little taller. I don't have their heights in front of me, but regardless, Trevor is so much skinnier and so much less just filled out from a shoulder standpoint. Like, there's so much more to Anthony. Anthony's just, he's got those, he makes the V, right? Anthony makes a V. Trevor kind of makes a straight up and down more silhouette. Trevor's not, super small. He's more muscled up than you would think, for what he looks like from a height, weight standpoint. but Anthony is just so undeniably strong and big out there. So it's hard to bring him down from in the pocket and when he's running outside of and beyond the line of scrimmage. So that's the first thing that I noticed with Anthony. And that type of physical like size, along with the speed, is going to get him, and the arm strength is going to get him a lot of leash. And he's going to need the leash because he is quite green. And it's the type of leash that you would have expected like Trey Lance to get that he never got. But Anthony is more refined than Trevor or Trey ever thought about being at any point in his career so far. So that's one thing. Anthony just has a better feel for the game already, even though it's not like he has that many more starts. The COVID thing really screwed over Trey Lance bad, but also the 49ers also let down Trey Lance and not letting him get more starts. But he was just more green, and their team is just so much more well put together. But that's a whole crazy situation. The point being, Anthony's physical tools overall are undeniable to watch him out there moving with the football. Like watching him out there running around reminds me so much of Josh Allen. It's not just the size too, it's the speed. And with that size, he's just, they didn't really get to work the ball as much down the field as I would have liked. And that would have been a big time, like, whoa, Anthony can do that already. But what they did instead, and what they had to do instead, Anthony had to take off a lot because it wasn't there for him downfield. And so he would just do this side to side run thing where it'd be like Anthony left, Anthony right. Because he was running out of, he didn't see what he wanted to see passing it, and he didn't have the ability to make that next read. And I don't even think they were asking him to make that next read at all. I don't think there was 4 reads in Anthony's little thing there. I think they're trying to kind of give him one side of the field, and then if you don't see it, go. And that looks a lot like what Josh looked like in his first year. He wanted it so bad that it would just be like quarterback sweep to the left, quarterback sweep to the right, and he'd be trucking fools and just going through thing. And Anthony wasn't as passionate. He wasn't as like hard to, he wasn't like going through and seeking contact the way that Josh did. But he's also way faster than Josh is too. Not way, but he is tangibly faster than Josh Allen. It probably takes them like the same amount of runway. Like it doesn't take Kyler or Lamar as much runway to get moving at top speed. Because they are so big, it does take them a little bit more runway. But once they get going, it's also harder to bring them down than the latter, the Kyler, or I guess the former Kyler and Lamar, right? So it's a different speed, I guess, but still Anthony is tangibly faster. And once he's able to threaten defenses down the field more, then that's going to back off the defenses, and there's going to be more running lanes, and there's going to be less people for Anthony to run through, and it's going to be really, really dangerous, like really, really dangerous in a Josh Allen way. The question is, because you see year one Josh Allen, and just like Anthony, he had problems throwing accurate passes. It's just how it went. It's not that he didn't put it where he wanted to put it necessarily. He knows where it's going. He just doesn't know exactly where he needs to put that ball to fit it into NFL defenses at this time. NFL defenses, the windows, especially down the field, are way tighter than college. And Anthony, just like Josh, is going to have to learn how to fit the ball into those windows. That is actually something you can teach, and something that gets better over time in the NFL. Josh had a meteoric is not the right word. Well, if you look at the entire progression, it is quite meteoric, but it did take time. It was a step-by-step. Year 2, Josh could do more. Year 3, and then by the time they got Diggs, they really took off. And then it was, it kind of gave Josh the confidence to be able to do a lot more things. And it showed him how it was supposed to be done, kind of, I think. And it really put everything into place, as well as put all their receivers into their appropriate roles and everything. So there was a lot that went into that Diggs acquisition for Josh. And Michael Pittman is no Stephon Diggs. Let's be clear. They don't have Pittman isn't quite as complete as Diggs. Diggs does everything. Pittman, it doesn't feel like he's capable of being like an alpha one sometimes. It just doesn't feel like the whole route thing is there. Some of that has to do with the quarterbacks he's played with too, though. Like, it's hard to evaluate one without the other, right? And like I said, Anthony just doesn't have all the feel yet. The game is still moving pretty fast for him in the passing department. The good news is, and the point I was making about the leash is, because of the running department and because of the dynamic things he's going to be able to do there, he's going to get all the time in the world to figure this out. And he fits, Steichen did this with Jalen Hurts. That's the other thing it really reminds me of, is really early on Jalen Hurts. He would do the same things. He would, the thing wouldn't be there and he would run. That was a big part of it. And then they also kept it really horizontal. There was a lot of screens, a lot of short passing, a lot of things to kind of get the ball out of Anthony's hands. And I didn't think there was like enough like running off of that, but that's also a little bit more complicated to be throwing the ball on the run too. So just, they didn't ask Anthony to do as much, just like they didn't ask Jalen Hurts to do as much earlier on. But as we've seen, as the talent level has risen around Jalen, and as Jalen has worked himself into the quarterback that he is today, that is absolutely capable. If you have the physical tools, that's absolutely something that I think Anthony is capable of molding himself into. And you see that he's in a scheme that is capable of molding around that. And it's not just quarterbacks, it's quarterback and the scheme. Like, we saw Trevor in a totally messed up scheme his rookie year. And then we saw him in a regular scheme in year 2 and now year 3. And it's incredible how much better he looks and how much more coherent that offense is. And that's also a part of the game slowing down and him, knowing how to fit those throws down the field into the tight windows that it's required to throw into to throw the ball down the field. Now, the other thing about the Colts today is that the run game outside of Anthony was trash. Like, Deion Jackson is just a guy for sure. He has a little bit of speed, but it's not accompanied by much power at all. So if he's getting hit behind and, at the line of scrimmage, they're not going anywhere. So, and then, nobody else they have, Hull, who I thought had a little bit of pop. He's out. They put him on the IR. He got a knee injury later on in the game. So, yikes. That part of it is really bad. And it's basically the best advertisement for signing Jonathan Taylor to some money that I've ever seen, because I do think that Jonathan Taylor would add a lot of pop to this, because outside of Quinnen too, I'm not really super enthused by the Colts line. It didn't feel, I said Deion Jackson was horrible, but there wasn't also a lot of like big lanes for him to run through either. And then Anthony, for a defensive line that I don't think is heavy on rushers, there was a lot of pressure on Anthony too. So like I said, I don't think the line is anything to write home about like it used to be. Maybe it was never that great. It was just Constanzo kind of lost his deal, and now they're still trying to replace that left tackle. But anyway, I think Jonathan Taylor would have added a lot to this. And for what this game was for Anthony, I was impressed with some of the things he was able to do, but it was a little concerning that they weren't able to get more hits down the field and that they didn't challenge them as much down the field. But that's how the Eagles rolled too. And then they ramped up Jalen Hurts over time, both in that first season and then as the seasons progressed. So I think we'll see more from this team going forward. And you know what else? It was good for Anthony when he started leaning on Pittman more. Like when they got the Pittman screen, it seemed like Anthony, and for the touchdown, that was Anthony's big passing touchdown was a super well-designed screen, which is something the Eagles did a lot. They weren't all so well designed, but they did there. Like I said, there was a lot of horizontal action and screen action with this, which is what's to be expected early on in this story that I think we're seeing with Anthony trying to turn himself into Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, right? But that's a long way to go because the passing there's a lot of inaccuracy there, and then I'm not a huge fan of like Pierce, I guess, the way he looked out there. I think there's going to be a long time, or it's going to be later in the season before Pierce and Anthony are really going to be able to hook up a lot in the deep parts of the field. I think it's going to take a second. And I think teams are really going to have to respect the run game a little bit more and respect Anthony's ability to run to creep them up before they can really. It's gonna be a give and take, just like any offense, if they're able to pull that together. But it's going to be based on Anthony's ability to work and progress, and everything that I've read, seen, and heard come out of Anthony's mouth makes me think he is that type of guy, because he already looks so much smoother as a thrower of the football than he did before. Like, he's gotten a lot of the hitch out of his giddy up. It was never super hitchy, but this looks a lot better. He definitely put a lot of the work in before this season started to make the passing look smoother and have the ball come out a lot better in the short passing game. But there's still going to be a lot of incompletions, a lot of miscommunication, and a lot of rookie mistakes, because the game is moving too fast right now. And he's not, but to my point about the receivers, like, I like Josh Downs fine as the slot, and Michael Pittman is not a full one, but he's good. And they're going to have to decide in this season if they're going to keep him. So that's going to be interesting. But I think as the season progresses, I think this team can have something. And I think that the defense is going to put them in a lot of positions to succeed and put them in some short fields, because they're a very specific nut to crack with the way I was talking about with the defense, with the two defensive tackles. I thought Stewart made a big step up today, and then with DeForest Buckner is a destroyer of worlds. I can't believe that the 49ers let him go. I would have let Eric Armstead go, but it saved him $5 million, and that's probably part of the $5 million or whatever it was now in savings that allowed them to get Vernon Hargreaves. So I don't know, but DeForest Buckner is a destroyer of worlds. Zaire Franklin is incredible. It's also incredible that they were able to get both him and Shaq Leonard, together. Hopefully Shaq can get a little bit more on speed. He wasn't quite, didn't seem like he was quite all there, but having that little foursome up your middle there and being able to leave Shaq and Zaire on the field at all times and play whatever around them defensively does make them, if you don't have a good offensive line up the middle, then that can be a real problem for you. And it was for the Jaguars today, and it nearly led to them blowing this game. But at the same time, I still have hope. I still have expectations for the Jaguars. I don't know. They're closer to the median than they are closer to a Super Bowl contender, I would say. But that's just me. And then like I said, on the Colts, this is all a growing season for the Colts, both with Anthony and, don't forget, new regime. Like, this is the year in a new regime. You got to figure out which veterans that you have on this team, which players that you were dealt fit your scheme. And then you got to draft good around them, right? Seems like they've done some good drafting there. Didn't have to give up draft picks to move up to get Anthony, so they're going to have their own draft picks and whatnot there as well. And it's just going to be a growing thing, and they're going to be evaluating like Pittman. Like Pittman, they got to decide if Pittman is are they going to pay him, because he'll get paid on the open market, because there's not a lot of those type of guys going around. But I also don't think that he's AJ Brown. I don't think that he's Devontae Adams either by any means. So they kind of got to weigh that, because he might get paid like that. That's kind of what he's angling for. And I do think the Colts should lean on him, because I think Anthony needs that security blanket. And I think that Pittman is so much more explosive than the rest of the weapons at this time, including the tight ends who I wish Jelani Woods would have been able to play more. I think he's hurt, so we're not going to see him for a while, if at all. But Granson's not bad, but he's just a guy. Same with Deion Jackson. He's not bad. Like, he's not like you signed the practice squad and that's like the sixth guy and like we're deep in the season kind of guys, But bring back Jonathan Taylor, because I'd love to see what they could do with a little bit more running game, because it was terrible today. So a lot of season. Can't wait to watch more Anthony Richardson. He is the truth. It's just a question of, is he going to be able to make like a Josh type leap? Those type of leaps, that type of progression year to year doesn't come around all the time. But I think he's a worker. I think Bryce is a worker. We'll see on CJ. I don't think Will Levis doesn't seem like a worker if you can't beat out Malik Willis, but maybe Malik Willis made some strides. Maybe we'll get to see both. Who knows? Going to be a long season. Well, we're going to get to see those Titans play both these teams at some point, so that'll be interesting. This division is up for grabs. Got to work on my pointing. Jacksonville. There we go. Jacksonville is definitely the favorite, because Texans, I don't think they've got it. And Tennessee played tough. Tannehill looked kind of washed, but Tennessee defense was tough. As I said, it'll be a game of aggression. How much the Tennessee defense stays healthy, how much of the offensive line for Jacksonville gets healthy. All up for grabs. Appreciate your time today. I'm starting to ramble. Let's get out of here. Hope you enjoyed it. It's just, I know it's just me talking, but I hope the video has really added something to this, because you can really see this face that I cared. I shaved for you just now. I hope that you cared. I hope that face is still kind of red right there, maybe from doing it. Maybe it's the lighting. We're still working on all of this, is the point. We're still all getting better at this, but I hope seeing me and hearing me talk about this has added something for you. Appreciate your time and watching. Like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Otherwise, just download the podcast. That really helps me out a lot. Otherwise, and have a great rest of your day.